War of the Fifth Coalition. The overthrow of the Spanish Bourbons caused alarm in Austria over Napoleon's ambitions, while France's military difficulties in the peninsula encouraged Austria to go to war. In the early morning of April 10, 1809, the Austrian army crossed the Inn River and invaded Bavaria. The Austrian advance, however, was disorganized, and they were unable to defeat the Bavarian army before the French could concentrate their forces. Napoleon arrived from Paris on the 17th to lead the French campaign. In the following Battle of Eckmühl he was slightly wounded in the heel, but the Austrians were forced to retreat across the Danube. The French occupied Vienna on May 13, but most of the population had fled and the retreating army had destroyed all 4 bridges across the river. On May 21, the French attempted to cross the Danube, precipitating the Battle of Aspern-Essling. Both sides inflicted about 23,000 casualties on each other, and the French were forced back. The battle was reported in European capitals as a defeat for Napoleon and damaged his aura of invincibility. After 6 weeks of preparations, Napoleon made another attempt at crossing the Danube. In the ensuing Battle of Wagram, 5–6 July, the Austrians were forced to retreat, but the French and Austrians each suffered losses of 37,000 to 39,000 killed, wounded, or captured. The French caught up with the retreating Austrians at Znaim on July 10, and the latter signed an armistice on the 12th. In August, a British force landed in Holland but lost 4,000 men, mainly to illness, before withdrawing in December. The Treaty of Schönbrunn in October 1809 was harsh for Austria, which lost substantial territory and over 3 million subjects. France received Carinthia, Carniola, and the Adriatic ports of Trieste and Fiume, Rijeka. The part of Poland annexed by Austria in the Third Partition in 1795, known at the time as West Galicia, was given to the Polish-ruled Duchy of Warsaw, and the territory of the former Archbishopric of Salzburg went to Bavaria. Austria was required to pay an indemnity of 200 million francs, and its army was reduced to 150,000 men. Consolidation of the empire. Napoleon's union with Josephine had not produced a child, and he decided to secure the dynasty and strengthen its position in Europe by a strategic marriage into one of Europe's major royal houses. In November 1809, he announced his decision to divorce Josephine, and the marriage was annulled in January 1810. Napoleon had already commenced negotiations for the marriage of Tsar Alexander's sister Anna, but the Tsar responded that she was too young. Napoleon then turned to Austria, and a marriage to the Austrian emperor's daughter, Marie-Louise, was quickly agreed. The marriage was formalized in a civil ceremony on April 1 and a religious service at the Louvre on the following day. The marriage to Marie-Louise was widely seen as a shift in French policy towards stronger ties with Austria and away from the already strained relationship with Russia. On March 20, 1811, Marie-Louise gave birth to the heir apparent, François Charles Joseph Napoleon, King of Rome. With the annexation of the Papal States, May 1809, February 1810, Holland, July 1810, and the northern coastal regions of Westphalia, August 1810, mainland France further increased its territory. Napoleon now ruled about 40% of the European population either directly or indirectly through his satellite kingdoms. Invasion of Russia. Tsar Alexander saw the creation of the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, Napoleon's marriage alliance with Austria, and the election of the French Marshal Bernadotte as Crown Prince of Sweden as attempts to contain Russia. In December 1810, Napoleon annexed the Duchy of Oldenburg, which Alexander considered an insult as his uncle was the Duke. The Tsar responded by allowing neutral shipping into Russian ports and banning most French imports. Russia feared that Napoleon intended to restore the Kingdom of Poland, while Napoleon suspected Russia of seeking an alliance with Britain against France. In late 1811, Napoleon began planning an invasion of Russia. A Franco-Prussian alliance signed in February 1812 forced Prussia to provide 20,000 troops for the invasion, and, in March, Austria agreed to provide 30,000 men. Napoleon's multinational Grande Armée comprised around 450,000 frontline troops, of which about a third were native French speakers. Napoleon called the invasion the Second Polish War, but he refused to guarantee an independent Poland for fear of alienating his Austrian and Prussian allies. On June 24, Napoleon's troops began crossing the Niemen River into Russian Lithuania with the aim of luring the Russians into 1 or 2 decisive battles. The Russians retreated 320 kilometers east to the Dwina River and implemented a scorched earth policy, making it increasingly difficult for the French to forage food for themselves and their horses. On August 18, Napoleon captured Smolensk with a loss of 9,000 of his men, but the Russians were able to withdraw in good order. The Russians, now commanded by Kutuzov, made a stand at Borodino, outside Moscow, on September 7. The battle resulted in 44,000 Russian and 35,000 French dead, wounded or captured, in one of the bloodiest days of battle in Europe up to that time. The Russians withdrew overnight, and Napoleon later stated, "The most terrible of all my battles was the one before Moscow. The French showed themselves worthy of victory, and the Russians worthy of being invincible." The Russians retreated to Tarutino, and Napoleon entered Moscow on September 14. The following evening, the city was set on fire on the orders of its governor Feofor Rostophin. Alexander, in St. Petersburg, refused to negotiate a peace, and after 6 weeks Napoleon's army evacuated Moscow. After capturing Maloyaroslavets with a loss of 4,000 to 10,000 men, Napoleon retreated towards Smolensk. The French were attacked by Cossacks and peasants and suffered from the intense cold, disease, and lack of food and water. Around 40,000 to 50,000 troops reached Smolensk on November 9, a loss of about 60,000 in 3 weeks. Napoleon also heard that an attempted coup by General Malat in Paris had only narrowly failed. From Smolensk, Napoleon's army headed for Vilnius, where there was a French garrison of 20,000. In late November, under attack from all sides by Russian forces, the Grande Armée managed to cross the Berezina River on pontoon bridges in temperatures reaching -40°C, -40°F. On December 5, shortly before arriving in Vilnius, Napoleon left his disintegrating army for Paris. In the following weeks, the remnants of the Grande Armée, about 75,000 troops, crossed the Niemen into Allied territory. Russian military losses in the campaign were up to 300,000 and total deaths were up to 1 million.